In today's lesson, I'm going to show you two different methods that you can use to clear your subject's face. So let's get started. This is where we left off. We removed the texture from the skin, and we also used a really simple technique to get rid of a pimple. So we made this layer for these spots on his forehead. This is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like after. Now, this isn't the only way that you can remove spots within Premiere Pro. There are better ways out there, and of course, ways that can give you a cleaner result. So we're going to take a look at one of those methods today, which is to use After Effects within Premiere Pro. So this right now is kind of acceptable, but the problem is that we're still seeing an outline of that pimple. So it's not that perfect, and that's why we can use a more suitable program for these things, which is After Effects. So I'm just going to duplicate all three of my layers, hold down Option or Alt, and just drag them towards the right side. On this second duplicate set, we're going to get rid of these spots and right-click on Skin Retouch. Select the Replace with After Effects composition, and this way we can take this into After Effects, edit it there, and then bring it back into Premiere Pro. It's going to ask you to save your project. Just do it real quick. Call it Spot, and OK. So it brought that exact linked comp inside here. And when it comes to removing spots within After Effects, there are many ways that you can do it. You can either use the clone tool, the brush tool, some masking, blurs, and just a lot more options that you would normally have inside Premiere Pro. So first, let's go ahead and duplicate our Skin Retouch, Command D or Control D. I'm going to call the bottom one Patch, and the top one Source. We're going to create different mask layers on Source and have Patch kind of reveal itself underneath. You can go ahead and create many more masks so you can get rid of all the spots, but I'm just going to stick with 2 for now so that we can focus on the actual technique. So go to the beginning of your timeline, hold down space to move up. Using the ellipse tool, we're going to create a nice mask around our first pimple. There we go. Let's move it up a bit. And then we're going to just change this from Add to Subtract. So it's going to reveal what's underneath, which is our patch layer. So if I solo my source layer, you can see there's a big hole. And you can see the transparency background by turning on this. Before we move on, we need to kind of soften things out. So open your mask layer and feather this guy out so it looks rather soft. Let's do the same thing with our second pimple. Grab the same source layer, ellipse tool, and draw a nice circle around your second pimple. Drag it up a bit and change it from Add to Subtract. Then feather that edge until it looks good. When I bring back my layers, everything is going to look normal, but when I hit P on my patch layer and move it around, you can see that I have removed that pimple simply by pushing this video a little bit towards the right. So this is what it looked like before. I used position X to just move it a little bit towards the right. And since the source layer is above it and the only hole for the bottom layer to be visible is the spot in which the pimple was there, we ended up getting this pimple removal effect just by using the actual skin. You can see that the other pimple is gone too. You can play around with this. You can see that I'm just simply moving the skin around. You can use position X and Y until you get a decent result. So there we go. We got rid of 2 of the pimples just by using this patching technique. Now, because our video is moving, we need to track the different mask. So select mask 1 and mask 2, right click, track mask. Make sure you're at the beginning of your timeline and choose the right method for the mask. Depending on how your video is looking, you would want to choose one of these. My subject is keeping their head still. They're just tilting a little bit towards the left and right. So a simple position scale rotation method will do it for me. I have both of the masks selected, and now I can go ahead and track forward. Once we're done tracking, we're going to get all of these keyframes. And if you want, you can go ahead and create more masks around the pimples. But for this example, I'm just going to stick with these 2 different masks. So now when we scroll through, you can see that those pimples are no longer there. If I just bring the original video underneath, you can see the difference. This is before. We had the pimples up here, this one and this one. And this is after. And if you'd like, you can also create keyframes for the patch layer so that when the movement happens on the source layer, we do not reveal something underneath. So you can see the patch layer is currently right here, but I can also create keyframes for it and have it be at different times so that I don't get any additional imperfections from the patch layer. So this was our second technique. It's rather easy. We only need to use After Effects and Premiere Pro. Once we're done, we can hit Command S or Control S on Windows and then go back to Premiere Pro. Now we got rid of those 2 pimples. So there's definitely a big difference. Over here, we can see the little outline of the pimple, but on the second technique, we just don't get that outline at all. Now I'm going to show you a third technique, which is a little time consuming, but it gives you the best result. So just duplicate this layer one more time, not these spots adjustment layer. And again, we're going to right click, replace with After Effects composition. So on this one, we're actually going to be using Photoshop through After Effects. So this is 3 programs working together, but it gives you the most professional looking result when it comes to skin imperfections. It can also be used for any other scenario where you want to remove something from that area. It could be removing people, removing different spots on a shirt, anything that requires advanced tools for you to just remove that bit in the most clean way. So for this third technique, I'm actually going to use our next video, which I'm just going to make a sequence from this clip. So over here, this person does have a lot of pimples, especially on their chin area. And for me to use the previous techniques, it would not be that suitable because they're closely paced and we're getting rather big bumps. So for this one, we're going to jump into the third technique, which involves After Effects and Photoshop. So we're using 3 programs together. I'm just going to get rid of the part where he covers his face, so we only get this bit. I'm going to duplicate this so we see a before and after, and right click, replace with After Effects composition. So over here, we're going to do a similar method. We're going to mask those pimples individually and subtract them, then feather them out so that the edges look clean. Let's zoom in right onto his chin and begin making our mask. You can also use the pen tool if there's like a big patch that you'd like to get rid of. For this, I'm going to use the ellipse tool and the pen tool. So go to the beginning of your timeline. This one, I can just get rid of it using the ellipse tool. Make sure to change it from add to subtract. So we're looking to create those little holes all around the subject's face. Hit F on that mask. Let's add maybe 10 pixels to get a softer look. Now proceed down and create as many masks as you need. If you want to use the pen tool, just grab it, selecting the video first, and just create a nice selection around that area. Be sure to leave enough space so that when you feather it, you do not reveal bits of that imperfection. Subtract and feather. So I'm going to repeat this all over his face. Make sure that you're doing at the start of your timeline and not later, so that everything is nicely placed and we can track moving forward. If at the beginning of your timeline your subject isn't looking straight, then you can just go forward, do your masking there, then track backwards, then forward. But for my case, my subject is just looking straight in the camera from the beginning to the end, so I might as well just start here. So I'm going to repeat this masking all around his face, and then I'll be right back to continue. So I made all these different masks around his face, mostly his chin. And before we get started with the tracking, we're going to turn the mode of all of our masks to none. First, we chose subtract so we can make sure that our selection includes extra bits from the face and that we don't get little bits of the pimple revealed. Once we're done with the selection, select your first mask, hold down Shift, then the last mask, change it from whatever it is to none. So we want to make sure that there is something visible for After Effects to track. With all of them selected, right-click, Track Mask, and you're going to get this in your tracker panel. If your tracker panel is not visible, just bring it in right here. And make sure that all of your mask is within this area. I'm going to put mine on position, scale, and rotation because like we said, if your subject is looking straight ahead, you don't really need to do much. But if they were turning around, maybe tilting their head, then you would want to choose a different method. I'm just going to stick with position, scale, and rotation. Then we can begin tracking forward. This is going to take some time, so let it do its thing, and then I'll be back so we can continue. So now we have all of these keyframes for the mask. And when we scroll through, you can see that the mask is stuck on our subject's face when they're moving. Once I have this, I can now turn the mode to subtract. I have all of them selected. Just go over here and change it from none to subtract. Now we're going to get these little holes inside our subject's face. And now this is where Photoshop comes in. Grab the Content Aware Fill panel, which should be in your sidebar, but if it's not, just go over here and enable it right there. So now once we have this, we can go ahead and create our reference frame, which is basically going to be a picture of your video in the best state. And based on that, After Effects is going to fill in those areas that you selected with the mask. So it's basically like the Content Aware Fill in Photoshop, but it works a bit differently. I'm going to walk you through that right now. Before that, let's just change the mask modes into none, so that in Photoshop we get to deal with the whole picture first, and then we can get rid of those spots separately. So bring in your Content Aware Fill panel. If you're not seeing it, just enable it here. And you're just going to create a reference frame. So this depends entirely on your video. If there is a shift in lighting in your clip, you would need to create multiple reference frames. For example, if over here my subject just looks to the side and we get a shadow casted, I would have to create another reference frame a few frames before that shift. But if your subject is looking straight ahead and there isn't any difference in lighting, then you only need one frame. So the number of reference frames depends on the amount of shifts in lighting. And you would create those frames before that shift and then after the shift. So I'm just going to make a marker here just to show you what I mean. Let's say right on this marker, my subject looks towards the left and we get a darker, just a shadow casted on this side of his face. So before he turns his face, which is right over here, I'm going to make a reference frame. And then I would need to make another one after, So we have a frame for before he turns his face and another frame for when he turns his face. This way After Effects will know that this is still the same face, but there is just a shift in lighting. But luckily for our video, everything is pretty stable. We do not get any different lighting. So I only need to create one for this video. I'm going to go to the beginning where the subject is looking straight ahead and then click on Create Reference Frame. This will take you to Photoshop. I have other versions opened here. And we have our reference layer. Now let's get rid of these spots using the healing brush in Photoshop. Select your layer, hit J on your keyboard to grab the healing brush tool. If you long click it, you can choose it right here. By default, it may be on this one, but this is more suitable. Click on it once, right click, make sure that your hardness is at 0 and you have the right sizing. Once we're done with that, we can hold down Option or Alt, grab a source point and cover up those pimples. You can also use the right and left bracket key to change the size of your brush, make your selection, and just cover those up. Hold down the spacebar to move the canvas around, and just use whatever method you prefer to cover up these spots. It's a lot easier to do it in Photoshop because of all the extra tools that we have. Once you're done removing those spots, we're going to just create a layer that's just going to soften things out on the face. So duplicate your reference frame, Command I, then change the blending mode to Vivid Light. We're trying to make everything flat. Then go to Filter, Other, High Pass, and increase this until you have a rather flat surface on your subject's face. So maybe around 5 is suitable. Hit OK. Soften out those edges using a simple Gaussian blur effect. I will go with 1. Hit OK. Hold down Option or Alt, press on the Mask button. And now we're just going on the areas that we removed just to make everything a little bit flat. So grab your brush, hit B on your keyboard. With the white color, make sure that you have 0 hardness. Zoom right in and just go over those areas. Before that, I'm just going to reduce the fill to maybe 40%. Let's try 50 for now. So we don't completely blur out the face and just give it a rather soft look. I also have my flow at around 38. So just go over the areas that you just painted over with the healing brush tool, and that way we can get a softer look on those healing brush edges. So this is what it looked like before. This is after. It's a really subtle change, but it's going to make those spots less visible. This is the easiest method for removing spots. You can also do frequency separation, which is something that most photographers are familiar with. But I'm just going to stick with the simplest method just in case frequency separation may be too complex for some of you. Alright, so once you're done removing these spots from your subject's face, we're going to hit Command S and then go back into After Effects. Once we're in After Effects, we're going to drag the reference frame below the original video, go on the original clip, head over to the Content Aware Fill and change the fill method to Surface. And make sure you have lightening correction turned on. You can choose the amount of lightening correction. I'm going to go with moderate. And range, we want to put it on work area. Then we're going to go back to the video, hit M on our keyboard to reveal all the masks, select them all, and change them from none to subtract. Once we're done with that, we're going to generate fill layer. Have your playhead at the beginning of the timeline, and then hit generate fill layer. It's going to analyze your clip and then fill in those gaps. You can see we have a new fill layer. Just let it do its thing, and then you'll be left with a clean face for your subject. So once it's done analyzing, we now have a clear skin for our subject. Moving forward, you can see that everything is pretty clean. This is only possible because of the feather of the mask and, of course, Photoshop. So using those different portals, we can get a clean result like this. So what's happening here is that this fill layer was generated from the Photoshop editing that we did. So as you can see, when I solo this, we have clear skin. They're just in little circles because the fill layer is connected to the mask that we made, these guys. And the reference frame is the frame that we edited in Photoshop. So this is the Photoshop layer. The fill layer uses this reference frame to fill in those areas that we created using the mask. So it has many steps, but the end result is pretty good, as you can see. So make sure to check your video and that you do not reveal any of the pimples throughout the timeline. If you saw that one of the imperfections was visible, you can always just go to the video, add a mask to that new layer, and then just generate that fill layer again. You can also delete any of these if you'd prefer, but I don't think that that would be the case. You would usually want to add to the areas, which, like we said, you can do by creating a new mask and having After Effects analyze the footage again. So this was before. We had all these areas on his face. This is after. Once we're done in After Effects, we can hit Command S or Control S to go back to Premiere Pro. So this is where the original video took place. When I zoom in, you can see that we're not getting those imperfections like we did in the original clip. Let's zoom in a little bit more and take a look at it before and after. So this was before, this is after. This was only possible because of Photoshop and After Effects. It was a little time consuming compared to our first method, which was to use Gaussian blur in Premiere Pro, but the end result is a lot more clean compared to our first method. You can also use this technique to get rid of people, patterns on a wall, get rid of different spots on a table, or just anything else. With the help of After Effects and Photoshop, you can just remove anything from a video. So that was our second method of retouching skin. In the further lessons, we're going to take a look at other types of retouching and see how we can transform the skin of our subjects and make them look better. I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you in the next one.